Hi there. In this multi-part tutorial series, I will introduce you to programming from the very basics using Python programming language. This tutorial is going to be a slow-paced session, so it is meant for people who are absolute beginners to programming. But if you already have done some programming on your own, if you did some self-learning, I hope that this tutorial will build on strong foundations, so this can actually fill up some gaps in your learning in the fundamentals of programming. Um, Python has become a very popular language in the industry right now. It is a general purpose language, so that's the reason I'm focusing on Python. But whatever concepts you learn related to programming idioms and the logic and algorithms, you can apply them in any language of your choice when you uh, journey into other languages like, say, JavaScript in the future, or maybe if you're looking into C or C++ in the long run. So the concept of programming remain the same. The languages vary. Learning programming is like speaking to a computer in a language that it understands. And as we all know today, computers are capable of understanding different languages with the aid of programming environments, be it C or C++ or Java or Scala or JavaScript and so on. There are languages which are general purpose languages, which you can use to build full blown applications or tool chains or all kinds of stuff. Whatever apps you're seeing right now, which I'm displaying on the screen, be the web browser or the desktop environment, all these are built using programs in some language or the other. You can also look at programming in domain specific variants, like you have, for example, Excel macros, right? So if you've been using MS Excel or any kind of spreadsheet, they might have a macro support which lets you automate certain workflow in there. Python, being a general purpose language, can be used to build all kinds of applications, but it's also available as extensions in various other frameworks and tool chains today. So you can apply the learning of Python that you get in this tutorial for automation, for web development. Basically, I'm talking about the middleware web development. Web development activities. You can also use it in cybersecurity. You could also use it for writing macros. I heard that recently Excel has support for Python based macros. So you can apply them in all these kind of use cases. Python has also become the most popular language amongst the data science community. So if you're doing data analytics, or if you are doing things like scraping data and curating it, and then building machine learning models for all these kind of workflows, Python has become a very popular language of usage right now. So you can also use Python for writing embedded code these days with the aid of a dialect of Python called MicroPython. I will cover MicroPython also as a part of this tutorial series in the much later stage. So this tutorial would be mostly for people who want to apply programming idioms, understand flow control logic, understand about algorithms, and so on. All right, without any further ado, let's get started. In order to get working on Python, you need to have Python installed on your computer, and there are many ways you can get access to Python runtime. One easy way is using web-based access. For example, if at all you're on the internet, you can get access to Python runtimes on the cloud. One of them is Google Colab, so also called as Collaboratory. So if you go to collab.research.google.com, and if you sign up within your using your Google account, maybe if you have a Gmail account or a Google Drive account, you can sign up using that. And once you do so, you can actually work on Python using the cloud instance hosted on Google's data centers. This is one way to get started on Python. You can also use another cloud instance available as REPL.it. There's many of these cloud instances. They give you a free version which is quite limited, but then if at all you're looking at full-blown features, I think they look for paid editions. If you click on the pricing, you have a different pricing model in here, right? We have a starter version, we have different pricing for different kinds of workflow and use cases. You can also use Python Anywhere, which is also quite popular. It is powered by Anaconda right now. So this also is a cloud-based instance. And if you want to get full access to a lot of features, you need to pay using their pricing page here. If you're just learning Python at the very basics, just learning about the tutorial concepts and so on, I personally like this pythontutor.com. It's a very intuitive way to learn Python programming. Initially, it's meant for Python, but now you can learn Python, Java, C, C++, C, C++, and JavaScript, as you can see here. When you click on Python link, you can actually write small snippet of Python code in this window, right? And you can try executing them, and you can see them executed and shown up in a very graphical manner. For people who are learning about flow control logic or how data structures are worked, how data structures are operated upon, I think this tool would be very useful to learn as such. But all these are cloud instances. But if you're going to be doing full-time development in Python, I think having a local installation of Python would be suitable. And if you're all you want to have a local installation of Python, I think there are many ways to get it installed. The official site for Python is python.org. This is where you can get the access to the Python documentation and also the download links. And you can download for Windows, MacOS, and for Linux, though they don't show any option in here, most Linux distributions come with Python pre-installed by the distro vendor. The version of Python that comes pre-installed in your distribution might be slightly older than what you see in python.org. For example, I'm using Ubuntu, and what is bundled in my Ubuntu desktop at this moment is Python 3.11, while the latest version is Python 3.12. Well, if you're looking at the latest version of Python, I think you can build from source or you can use other formats. But if you're using Windows, I think you can get the latest version of Python right here, which is available as a download. I will show you how to install on Windows in a while, but for now, this is the location where you can get it from the official site. But if you're going to be working on Python and not just use the standard library and runtime, that's what is bundled when you download from here. So when you go to python.org and download the Python runtime here, you get the language runtime, the official language runtime, along with the standard library. And the download is not very big. I think it'll come to less than 100 megabytes as such at this moment. But then if you want to do a lot of other stuff, like say you want to do things like machine learning or data analytics or plotting and graphing, data visualization, and a lot of other use cases, you might need to install a lot of third-party frameworks and libraries. And my suggestion in such case would be to install a distribution of Python from anaconda.com. Anaconda.com provides a free Python distribution, which could be a little big. If you just click on the free download, you get the download options for the major platforms, that is Windows, macOS, or Linux. And why I recommend using Anaconda Python is that you can have a more consistent interface if you switch between platforms. You might be working on Windows today, or you want to switch to Linux, or you want to switch to macOS. By using Anaconda, you're trying to avoid the platform-specific dependencies, and you want to have a more consistent version of Python. It also provides its own packaging mechanism called Conda, which is quite powerful. It bundles a lot of frameworks and libraries, mostly focused on AI and machine learning and data sciences, right? You can see that. So it's focused on that area. So the download could be a little big. So we click on the download link for, let's say I'm selecting Linux here because I'm running on a Linux desktop. So if you click on the Linux link here, I think the download is already started, which you can see. It's about a 1.1 gigabyte download on the Linux system. I already have downloaded some time back, so I'm going to cancel this. So the old download is already there, right? Which I will install and show you. Even on Windows, I think it'll be about close to a gigabyte download. It could be about 800 to 900 MB download. So you can download even for Windows and install the same. And this particular distribution, though it gives you the Python language runtime and all the libraries and frameworks for developing applications and tool chains using Python, what is not bundled is an IDE. If at all you're looking for a good IDE to work on Python, there are many choices available. Some of you might be using PyCharm, some of you might be using Sublime Text or any kind of text editor that provides programming functionality. But if you're looking for a most popular IDE in the recent times, which is quite lightweight, but at the same time quite capable, is this IDE called Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is also a free download, available on all the major platforms, Windows, macOS, and Linux. So you can download this and install it on your computer. So if you click on the download link here, it'll download the version for, it shows your download links for Windows, for Linux, and for macOS. Based on what platform you're using, you can download the appropriate version and install it on your computer. Installing this is pretty straightforward. It's like how you install any other applications. It's not going to be any different, right? So if you're going to be using a Windows desktop, for example, and most people who work on Windows literally struggle getting things working. So I will show you a quick walkthrough on installing VS Code and also on Anaconda distribution. So let me just switch screen. Hang on a moment. All right, so I think I've brought up my Windows desktop here, running on a virtual machine, of course. I just have a VM set up. So I have opened a web browser here where you can see that you have Anaconda. I think I've already downloaded Anaconda here. You can click on the free download even here. It'll download for Windows automatically. You get the Windows download, detecting it. It's already being done. So you can see the download link already has the Windows version downloaded, the latest edition. Anaconda Python will be maybe about 1.5 years older than the latest Python. So the current version of Python, if you go to python.org, would be Python 3.12. But what is shipped with Anaconda at this moment, when I'm making this video, is 3.11, right? So you'll have one version older. So every minor version increase of Python release, you will see for every new minor version release, you will see some new syntax grammar being added, or maybe some additions of new libraries. So you'll have some minute changes here and there. If you're really focused on those new additions, then you want to go with the latest version. Otherwise, use the version that's quite mature, been there for some time, right? So, so here you can just click on, once you downloaded this Anaconda distribution of Windows, you can click on this link to open it. This should take some time. All right, it's a Windows desktop, so it's going to be a little slow. Let me just go to downloads and try to run this manually. So this will launch the Anaconda installer for Windows, which will be a graphical installer. You get this kind of an interface when you get the Anaconda, when you double click on the downloaded Anaconda installer. So you can, as usual, click on next and of course read the license agreement. It's about free software license, I believe. And you can click on agree. And one of the other benefits of using Anaconda is that you do not require administration privileges. Even on Linux environment, you can install Anaconda in your home directory, which I will show you in a while. And the same thing works even for macOS, right? So, so here I can just select install for me, which is generally recommended. If you want to install for all users, it requires admin privileges. You don't want to do that. You can just install for your own account. Click on next. And this is where it's going to be installed in your user profile folder on Windows, and click on next. While you're installing, it shows you a lot of options. Whether you want to create start menu shortcuts, good idea to have it. Add Anaconda to my path environment variable. You may want to add it or you may not want to add it. So the default should be perfectly fine. I would leave the defaults. But some of you who want to just have Anaconda Python alone and no other Python installations, I think they will turn this on. But it's possible that in your development workflow, you might have multiple installations of Python. If you do that, then it's suggested to leave this off, right? And you can also register Anaconda 3 as a default Python if you want to. And again, this is optional. You can turn it off if you don't want to do that. And you can also clear the package cache upon completion. The installation will take a fair amount of time. When I click on install, the actual extraction is seemingly faster, but after extraction, the actual installation will take a couple of minutes. You can also click on show details to see what's going on. Extracting all the packages that you see here. Well, while this is going on, I can also show you that you can download VS Code also for Windows. You can just go to your favorite web browser and just go to code.visualstudio.com. This is the website. Just go to code.visualstudio.com and you can just outright see a download link here, or you can look at the download for Windows right here. Click on this link and you can download it right from here. This is one way to do it. Another way to do it is from Microsoft Store. If at all you want to install it from Microsoft Store, you can open up Microsoft Store and you can search for VS Code. When you do a search for VS Code here, you get this Visual Studio Code app, which you can install from Microsoft Store also. You can use any of these options. So if you're using Windows, I think I would recommend going to Microsoft Store and installing it from there. Anaconda is not shown up in Microsoft Store as yet. So that's one thing to note. You can install the official Python by searching for Python on Microsoft Store and installing from there. The process is almost the same, right? And this will take some time. It's going to download it from, code.visualstudio.com and install it from there. So you can just go ahead with this. We'll get back once the installation is completed and I will show you how to get started on the same. All right, the installation has gone through. So you can see that VS Code is installed on my Windows desktop. And once it's installed, you should be able to launch it. I will show you how to launch in a while. But I also saw that the Anaconda is also installed. I think it's all done. You can see that in here. The installation is completed for Anaconda. So you can click on next and click on next one more time. And you can launch Anaconda Navigator to get started with Anaconda, but I would consider that as a bloatware. So I don't use Anaconda Navigator. You can. It takes some time to launch and bring up a nice dashboard for you to start with the tools provided by Anaconda, which involves Jupyter Notebook and so on. But for now, I'm just going to turn this off and turn this also off and click on finish. Once done, to get started with Anaconda Python, I think these are like previous installs I've tried. I think I'll just close this. I think I double clicked a couple of times in Windows, so I think it launched slowly. Anyways, once Anaconda is installed and VS Code is also installed, you can start search for VS Code by just typing VS Code right in here in the search bar on Windows. And you can see that Visual Studio Code app is shown right here. So you can actually add that into your taskbar. I think there's a way to add it right here. Pin it to taskbar or maybe even the start window. So you can have it launched from here. Once you launch VS Code for the first time, I think you get this kind of an interface. And VS Code is a polyglot IDE, which means you can use it to develop programs in variety of languages. You can develop code using Java, C#, JavaScript, many other tools, like many of the programming environments. And it's a quite powerful tool if you learn how to use it. So in order to use Python on VS Code, you might need to install the Python extensions. I think it's trying to open a couple of things. I'll try to, don't save and close it. You can go to the extensions manager here. Under the extensions manager, I think it's already installing Python on mine. Surprised. But you can search for extensions and search for Python. When you search for Python, you will see a link here, Python IntelliSense. It's from Microsoft. Python from Microsoft. You might want to install this if it's not already installed. In my case, it's automatically installed. I'm not sure if that's the general thing that happens, but last time I remember I had to manually install it. You can select this and you can click on install. You'll have an install link that comes up if it's a new extension. In my case, the installation is already done. I just need to reload VS Code to have it working. Alongside with that, In the extensions, you click on the extensions link that you see, extensions button that you see on the left corner, and you click on this extensions. You have the extensions tab coming up. In here, you can also install another tool called Jupyter, which is a very useful tool for exploring Python features. So, and also working on a couple of other projects that involves data analytics, visualization. I think Jupyter is quite popularly being used. You can install Jupyter also from here. I think it's already installed on my setup. So it shows disable and uninstall option. But if it's not already installed, you have an install option where you can click on install, and this extension would also be available on VS Code. So these two tools are what you need to install in VS Code to get started on Python. In order to explore on Anaconda Python distribution, you can go to Windows Search, and you can just search for Anaconda. The moment I type Anaconda, you can see a lot of matches come up, like Anaconda Navigator. You have Anaconda Prompt and Anaconda PowerShell Prompt. You can either choose Anaconda Prompt or Anaconda PowerShell Prompt in order to get started in your Python environment. So if you click on Anaconda Prompt here, for example, it opens up the Windows CMD prompt. In my case, it opened up in a Windows terminal. So you might get a CMD prompt or a Windows terminal with a CMD prompt. And what is noticeable here is you have a prompt that starts with base. This is sort of a hint indicating that you're working on an Anaconda environment. It sets up a Windows command prompt with a lot of environment variables being configured, and it also changes the prompt string to reveal the same with that base being shown in the beginning at the prefix, right? So this is where you can try launching Python. So in order to test whether Python is working on Windows, you can just type Python right here, and you're now greeted with a Python prompt. And this is a Python prompt where you can try out Python statements, expressions, and small snippets of Python code. So this is an exploratory prompt. We also call this as a read, evaluate, print loop. Also stands for REPL, REPL, right? So you can try out simple statements and expressions. For example, you can try something like a 4 plus 5, a simple arithmetic expression in here, and you get the result. So it works like a calculator. If you want to exit from this Python prompt, you might want to type Control Z, or you might call it Z if you live in the US, right? So I pronounce as Z in India. So you can just type this key combination, Control Z or Control Z, and you get that character right there as cap Z, and press enter. This exits from the Python prompt, and you're at the Windows command prompt. This Windows command prompt is a shell prompt. It's like a shell prompt where you can type in Windows commands, but you cannot type any Python statements here. If you try 4 plus 5 here, it doesn't work, right? It assumes that 4 is a command, and it says that command is not found. But on the contrary, if at all you want to launch Python, you just start by typing Python right here. And you can try out simple expressions and statements in this Python shell. You could to exit, just type Control Z, enter. This is what you do it on. This is how we do it on Windows. And you can see that the version of Python that got installed, as you can see when I launched Python, is Python 3.11.5 at this moment when I'm recording this video. And it shows this packaged by Anaconda. It's Anaconda distributions version of Python. And it also gives you the date and other details, right? If you want to do the same thing on a Linux or a MacOS, if you want to install Anaconda, I will show you how it is done. VS Code is pretty straightforward. You would install using a package manager. I'll switch screen and I'll show you that. Let me move this across. You might want to open up a terminal on Linux or a MacOS to get started. So I have already downloaded Anaconda on my Linux system. If you have used a Mac, if you're using a Mac, you can also do the same. You can go to anaconda.com and click on download for Mac, and the download would be stored mostly in the downloads folder, right? So if you open up your Mac terminal or your Linux terminal, in all likelihood, the download would be under downloads folder in your home directory. So you can just, maybe to be more specific, you can say tilde. Tilde is your home directory / downloads. I'm going to use tab to complete. Most modern shells like Bash and Z shell would understand tab completion. Press tab here, and you can see that the Anaconda download is right here. It ends with generally a .sh extension indicating that it's some kind of a shell script. So in order to run this, first thing you need to do is you might want to do a chmod plus X. This is to add execute permissions on that program that you downloaded. So you say tilde slash downloads slash Anaconda tab. Just tab complete. It's going to complete this entire path. Once done, if you use the colorized version of ls, which is very likely on most Linux distributions, I guess also on Mac, you will see it's colored a little differently. Sometimes you'll also see an asterisk at the end. It's possible. So this indicates that the execute permission is added. You can also run ls-l. There's a shell command, by the way, to list the contents of a folder, and -l is for long listing. So when you say ls-l tilde slash downloads, you can see that this file is downloaded, and the file size is shown here. It's 1.1 gigabytes. And you can also see the execute permissions being added in here, which I did with the chmod command. Now to run this, you can just directly say at your shell prompt, tilde slash downloads. Again, tab complete, right? And an tab complete. It's going to complete this entire path, and then press enter. There's a command line variant of installer which works both on Mac and on Linux systems, most Unix environments, I would say. And it gives you a welcome screen, and it asks, in order to continue installation process, please review the license agreement. Please press enter to continue. Yes, let's press enter now. In a pager, it shows the entire license agreement. Like on Windows, you got this in a, the next kind of a screen, right? Click on Q here to end this. Come out of it by pressing Q, and it'll ask you, do you accept the license terms, yes or no? So you can just type YES. Obviously, I'll type the whole word there and press enter. And it asks you where Anaconda would want to be installed. The default location that's chosen is in my home directory, Anaconda 3. So you can note down this location, right? So I've seen certain versions of Anaconda, they install in a different path. I've seen people telling me that in my training sessions. So it's a better idea to just note down this path. It's very likely going to be the folder like you see in mine. It'll be like /home/ your username /Anaconda 3. So you just press enter, and the installation is going to continue. While this install is going through, you can go ahead and install Visual Studio Code for your Linux or your MacOS environment. And in order to install VS Code, just one moment, please. Let me bring up my web browser. Yeah. If you go to the Visual Studio Code download, if you're using a Mac, you can just download the version appropriate for Mac. I think you have Mac for Intel, the very old Macs, and your Mac for the Apple Silicon. So you can select whether it's for Intel chip or Apple Silicon. I think the default link would have selected it appropriately, right? If you're using a Mac. If you're using Linux, ready-made packages are available for Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, Fedora, and SUSE. So you can select the packages accordingly and install them. And it's possible that you might be running Linux on a non-Intel platform, like maybe on a Raspberry Pi board. Rare, but maybe it's an ARM64 kind of a system or ARM32, you have options available for them too. If you're using most distributions like Ubuntu or Red Hat, Linux, and so on, it's very likely that you could use their package managers to install VS Code instead. So it'll be better managed that way. So I'm using Ubuntu, so I can actually use the Ubuntu's package manager and check for VS Code. Oh, by the way, here, the Anaconda installation has gone through. The installation is completed, as you can see in the command line. And it says, do you wish to update the shell profile to automatically initialize Conda? Well, in order to make sure that whenever you launch the shell, you want to use Python that's provided by Anaconda distribution and not your default Python that's there in your distribution, you might want to type yes here. So if you just type yes, This will figure out what kind of shell you're using. The default shell I've configured on my Linux setup is bash. So it has actually modified the bash RC script, which means that if I close this shell, relaunch it again, I mean, if I close this terminal and relaunch it again, you will see that the Anaconda path environment would be added. So I can test this right here. So I can just type exit to exit the shell, launch the terminal again. Just one moment, the terminal's on the other screen. All right. As you can see that I've launched the terminal in here. It's got translucency. Let me avoid the distraction. Yeah. As soon as you launch the shell with Anaconda environment being applied, you will see that the shell prompt would have a prefix called base, just like on Windows. My original shell prompt simply had a $sign. Some of you might have a more exotic shell prompt. I kept it very simple for the training purposes here. So you can see a base prefix before the shell prompt. In fact, if for all you want to verify where Python is running from on all Unix's environments, when I say Unix's, Linux or MacOS, you can type which Python. It shows very clearly that Python is going to be located from this path, this location. In case you don't see this base prompt, the base prefix in your shell prompt, and if you type which Python, if it shows user bin Python, it's very likely that the Anaconda installer could not add to your shell profile. In such cases, you can manually run it by running this command. You can type source / Anaconda 3, the path where I've installed Anaconda /bin/activate. You just need to run this once. You can also put this line in your shell profile and this will work. For example, I will just show you right here. I can run a command called conda and say deactivate the shell prompt. I type conda deactivate. You can see my shell prompt is now changed to a simple $sign. Because I'm using Linux, there's already Python bundled with the Linux distribution. And you can find out which Python is that. It's from user bin folder. And if you want to find out what version of Python it is, if we just launch Python, it just shows Python 3.11.4 and it shows the build. You won't see a word called Anaconda anywhere in here, right? This is a distro vendor's setup of Python, right? But if you want to use the Anaconda build on your machine, so it's very likely that you might be using a very old Linux desktop or a Linux environment. Maybe if you're using these enterprise Linuxes, the version of Python that comes bundled will be very old. In fact, sometimes 10 years old, right? I've seen certain Red Hat enterprise Linuxes where you would see things like Python 3.4 or 3.2 or even worse, sometimes 2.7 as a default. I've seen a couple of MacOS deployments where the default Python is Python 2.7 in fact. And that's what will be shown up when you launch Python out of the box. But once you install Anaconda and you activate Anaconda, you get the latest version of Python. Not the latest, but something that's quite recent, right? So if at all I come out of this by typing Control D, by the way. On Windows, to exit the Python shell, you say Control Z, enter. Whereas on a Linux or a macOS environment, you type Control D. D is for dead. Okay. So, anyways, once I'm back at the shell prompt, this time to use the Anaconda's version of Python manually, I could do this. I could actually type source /Anaconda 3. I just tap completion /bin/activate. You do this now, and now I type which Python. It shows very clearly that the path or the Python binary is from the Anaconda folder. You can also launch Python to verify, and you can see that it launched. Oh, okay. It shows this version. I'm surprised. Okay, because I think I did a conda deactivate earlier. I should do conda activate. Okay, that should be a reason. So let me do that. Conda activate. This is not really required in your case. This is only required if you have deactivated conda manually. And now if you try to look up Python, well, it shows this version. Okay. It should show Anaconda here. surprised to see why it didn't show Anaconda. It's a little strange for me. Which Python? Yeah, it's coming from here. So it should have worked. Let's try. Type Python. Does it show anything sprays here? Okay. Yeah, it shows it's from Anaconda bin. So normally when you run Python, it should show up as Anaconda here, Anaconda distribution, Anaconda Inc. Let's verify the later point. I think maybe on the Linux build, they don't use that word Anaconda anymore. So that could be a possibility, right? So I think this is from Anaconda, if I'm not wrong, because if it shows which Python, if it shows Anaconda 3 bin, it's coming from Anaconda, right? That's what it is. Anyways, this is how you can get Python up and running on your system. By the way, if you really want to use install VS Code on your distribution, I'm using Ubuntu. So I can use Ubuntu's package manager. I can try doing a sudo apt install VS Code. I don't think it's available via apt package manager. So if it's not available by apt, very likely I can use snap. So I can use sudo snap install VS Code. I think it's simply called code now. It's not called VS Code anymore. Yeah, it's already installed on my system, right? So if you can do a snap install code, if you're using Ubuntu, if you're using certain distributions which are like Debian, or if you're using Arch Linux, I think it's called Code OSS. You want to check it out, right? But if you to avoid all this kind of confusion, you can manually go to code.visualstudio.com and download the package and install it manually using the package manager, right? So anyway, so this is how you get your Anaconda set up and Visual Studio Code installed. From my case, I think VS Code is installed. I can either launch VS Code by typing code at the shell prompt like this. I can see VS Code is launched on my setting, right? On my setup here. It's the same kind of interface like you just saw on Windows. So it's not different at all. So I'm going to be using Linux desktop for most of my demonstrations. Where things are a little different on Windows, I will switch to a Windows virtual machine and show you. But mostly, as long as you're inside the VS Code environment, it's all going to be the same, irrespective of whether you're using Windows, Linux, or a MacOS, right? So with this, I come to the conclusion of this particular part of the tutorial series where I got you started in getting the Python environment set up. The next session, I will introduce you to Python language itself. I will tell you more about the language features, introducing you to the very basics, like, starting with statements, expressions, variables, and data types. All right, then. So thank you very much. I hope you found this kind of tutorial useful. If you find it useful, do share, like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. Do that. I hope to get more audiences for this kind of tutorial. I hope many people would find this useful. So if you have any suggestions or queries, feel free to post them on comments, or you can also reach out to me personally. I will share my email and my contact details on the description. So just have a look at the description of this video. Thank you very much. Hope to meet you in the next session. Thank you.